Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Maria Parham, editorial page editor for the Arizona Daily Star. Tonight on AZ Illustrated Metro, we'll update you on recall efforts in the Sunnyside School District. We'll speak with the executive director of the YWCA about its employment education program for women. Then Georgia Davis discusses the politics of complementary and alternative medicine with a University of Arizona professor. But first, a look at today's top stories.
This afternoon, the Obama administration released the first enrollment numbers for the Affordable Care Act. During the first 6 weeks of open enrollment, nearly 33,000 Arizona residents signed up to get health insurance through the federal government. In Arizona, about 1 million people do not have health insurance. The Sunnyside School District is looking at ways to cut its budget after a budget override failed last week. Fernanda Chavarri has that story.
The list of possible reductions adds up to about $5.6 million for the Sunnyside School District. It includes cuts to jobs like the one of Julie Fouts.
Cuts are going to happen, but when it comes down to it, it's going to affect the kids.
District staff suggested closing 1 elementary school and 1 middle school, eliminating teachers and librarians, and cutting $500,000 from administration. Many at the meeting blamed controversy in the district for the failure of the override.
Community members are tired of the three-ring circus that is going on. It's not that they don't want to support the children.
4 out of the 5 board members are facing possible recalls, 2 of them because of their support for Superintendent Manuel Isquierdo after information about his bankruptcy and legal and financial issues surfaced.
This election was lost because of the continued negativity displayed by some community members who planted a seed of distrust with accusations of corruption and nepotism. And for that, I'm sorely disappointed.
Sunnyside officials are looking into whether poll workers violated the law by suggesting voters choose no on the override proposal. In the meantime, the governing board will consider the suggested cuts and vote on them later.
And that's a look at tonight's headlines.
Tucson's Sunnyside School District has been surrounded by controversy this year. Last week, voters rejected a budget override proposal. 4 of the 5 members of the district's governing board are facing the prospect of recall elections. It's an issue many say is dividing the community. Some of that was seen at last night's meeting, where dozens asked board members to put their differences aside and focus on the students. Fernanda Chavarri brings us this report.
Hello, this is Richard with the Sunnyside Recall.
Richard Hernandez is the force behind the recall campaign against Sunnyside's board president, Luis Gonzalez, and longtime board member, Bobby Garcia.
If you're registered to vote, I'm asking for your help.
He started collecting signatures over the summer after Gonzalez, Garcia, and Eva Carrillo Dong voted to renew the contract of Superintendent Manuel Isquierdo.
It was abundantly obvious when a packed room full of people at the board meeting were sharing with the community and the board that they did not want Dr. Isquierdo back as superintendent, and that was what started my quest on the current recall. Well, you know, he left Sunnyside. He took the position in San Antonio, Texas. He was vetted there, and they found that his behavior was unbecoming.
The only board member not facing a possible recall is Eva Carrillo Dong. She's up for re-election in 2014. Before the board renewed the superintendent's contract, information about his bankruptcy, as well as other legal and financial issues, surfaced. Hernandez, who is not related to board member Daniel Hernandez Jr., says that's not the only reason he started the recall of board members who extended Isquierdo's contract.
It is safe to say that 9 out of 10 people agree that there needs to be a change in leadership, not only at the board level, but definitely at the superintendent's office. I can't stress that enough. Everybody talks about the fact that Isquierdo needs to go. I have documentation that will prove corruption, inappropriate behavior. When you look at that, you cannot be anything less than compelled to say, we need an election, let the people speak.
What's been going on here is not good for the community.
The distrust in this superintendent, board, and administration began years ago. You continue to manipulate, bully, and spin reports and data to suit your needs and personal gains.
The board and Superintendent Isquierdo, I'm sorry to say you have not done your jobs correctly.
Superintendent Isquierdo says what's going on in Sunnyside is a reflection of the politics at the national level.
Whether a Democrat or Republican, a majority board's decision to say, you know, Dr. Isquierdo's leadership and contributions have been significant enough and have been result-oriented to say we want him to stay, we want to continue. There's no secret that 2 of the board members didn't agree with it, and I might add 2 of my more recent board members.
He's referring to Daniel Hernandez Jr. and Buck Crouch, who both voted against the renewal of his contract. Isquierdo says he understands that not all board members are going to agree.
But at the end of the day, the democratic process is what needs to be recognized and respected. As a result of their, and this is the 2 board members, reluctance to accept the decision, I think the community conversations continued, and unfortunately, allegations, criticism pursued. And as a result, recalls became the name of the game, became what people wanted to say. These board members voted for Dr. Isquierdo, and as a result, we're going to recall them. That may be part of the democratic process, recalls too, but I think recalls should be designed around someone who did something wrong, who's not attending meetings, who did something that didn't really represent the constituents as they elected them, not because they vote in a particular way.
Meanwhile, board president Luis Gonzalez is trying to recall 2 fellow board members and newcomers, Daniel Hernandez Jr. and Buck Crouch.
I actually, with my campaign manager, we asked for the other 2 recalls just to get public attention. You know, we have not gotten that. So that's what created the problem. We went out and recalled the other 2, and all of a sudden, the meeting was at our door. We said, wow, we should have done this at the beginning.
Gonzalez says people trying to recall him do not live in the district.
Why are they doing it? Because they have a personal vendetta against myself or other board members. Because either I didn't give them a contract because I cut the fat, and they're upset.
In paperwork filed with the Pima County School Superintendent's Office, the committee seeking to recall Gonzalez and Garcia said the 2 failed to respect the views of the district staff and failed to represent voters in the district, among other things.
My focus has been 3 things. First of all, kids first. Second of all, teachers, faculty, and staff. And thirdly, fiscal responsibility. And none of those things have been done by the majority of this board.
When Hernandez walks door to door on the streets of Tucson's South Side, he asks people to sign a recall petition because it's time for change. But he doesn't always tell people at the door the names of the board members he wants to recall or the reasons why.
I am part of a group of parents and teachers that are looking to change the Sunnyside School Board. If you're registered to vote, what your signature does is it forces a new election. It allows us, the community, to decide who the leadership will be. I try to keep it positive because there's enough negativity out there and all of it is justified. But if somebody asks me specifically, I will answer specifically. I know about the nepotism, I know about corruption, I know about the things that they do that are wrongful. But if not, I don't find a reason to make it worse.
Hernandez says by recalling 2 board members who support the superintendent, the board majority will shift, and the end goal is to replace Isquierdo as superintendent. Isquierdo says there are no issues at Sunnyside, and the recalls are unnecessary.
It's unfortunate. I don't agree with either one of them. I think right now it's unfortunate because both recalls have taken us from the important work.
As the district superintendent, Isquierdo says he will try to get all 5 board members to find common ground
and put students first. Now, they might argue they're doing that already and that people just won't agree with them, and that's why we have the challenge we have. But somehow there's a need for compromise. There's a need for unifying around a common message, and there's a need to put aside some of the insignificant differences that we're battling.
Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction John Huppenthal recently attended a public meeting in Sunnyside and offered to work as mediator for the board. Hernandez says he already has more than 1,500 signatures for each of the 2 recall efforts he's leading, about 200 more than what is legally required.
According to recent reports from the U.S. Census Bureau, Tucson ranks 6th among the poorest large metropolitan areas in the nation. Developing skills for good-paying jobs is a key to rising above poverty. Kelly Fryer, Executive Director of the YWCA, joins us to discuss how the organization is helping women gain skills for successful employment. Kelly, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
Can you start out by giving us a quick overview of the YWCA and what its missions are today?
Well, the YW is the oldest multicultural women's organization in the country. We've been here in Tucson for almost 100 years. Our mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. I feel like a superhero when I go to work every day.
That is a big mission.
We work to create change in people's lives on the individual level, on the local level, and on the national level. And I'm thrilled to be able to be here today to talk about the way that we're helping individual women here in Tucson.
So the Skills for Successful Employment program is what we want to talk about today, which is part of YWorks. Can you tell us what it is, who's there, and how it works?
Well, Skills for Successful Employment is part of a larger umbrella called YWorks, which actually got its start on the campus at the University of Arizona. Back in the mid-'70s, it was called the PHASE program, and it began to help what was then called displaced homemakers enter the workforce. Well, a number of years ago, we brought that program to the YWCA and made some updates and some tweaks and created a program that is now serving 2,300 women a year, both in English and in Spanish, helping them gain the skills that they need to enter the workforce and become more financially self-sufficient.
So who are these women who are coming into the program? Are they unemployed, underemployed?
Everybody has a different story. We have, well, a number of women who are in the program are coming out of very serious issues in their lives, like a large percentage of them are coming out of domestic abuse situations. And so not only are they facing some, economic challenges in their lives, but they're also facing just self-esteem issues. And so these programs are designed, Skills for Successful Employment is designed not only to help women learn how to write a resume or interview for a job, but they're also designed to help them, sort of find their voice again and gain some self-esteem. But you'd be surprised at the range of women. Some of them are, have never had a job before. And some of them they're teachers, accountants, attorneys. It's really the whole range of women who just need help right at this point in their lives moving to the next level.
And so what are the basic skills that you go through to try to teach them, and how much time do you spend doing that?
Well, the Skills for Successful Employment program itself is begins with a month of classes. Those classes meet Tuesday and Wednesday in the second week of the month and Tuesday and Wednesday in the third week of the month. So there are actually 4 sessions. And the skills that we teach begin with kind of a skills assessment. What are you good at? What do you love to do? And then kind of move from there. So we help women take their experiences, put them into a resume that is attractive to employers in this market. We do practice interviewing, so they gain those interview skills. And we have computer training. So it's amazing how even women who, I've met accountants and attorneys who have been, started working decades ago, but have never really learned how to use basic computer programs. And so we're teaching everything from here's a mouse and here's how you plug it in and turn it on, to here's how to work with a Word document or an Excel document. So it's a whole range of skills to prepare women for the workforce today.
And what kind of follow-up do you have after that month is over?
I think it's one of the things that makes the program unique. We have a monthly job strategy session. So women come and there's some peer mentoring where they share job leads and they share their experiences. But we also have one-on-one coaching for 6 months after they complete the classes. And we really work with them until they get that job.
Can you tell us what success looks like in this program to you? What kind, maybe a story that you've seen that illustrates what a huge difference you can make in a woman's life?
We have 3 metrics that we use for success. A woman gets a job, starts a business, or goes back to school, achieve some kind of educational goal. And the women who go through this program have a 90% success rate. So 90% of the women that go through this program succeed in one of those ways. And we know where they get jobs and how much they make when they get out. We can actually calculate that the women who go through YWorks are putting about $7 million back into the Tucson economy every 12 months. But what success really looks like is the face of Shauna. She was a stay-at-home mom. She was a volunteer. She was a donor. Her husband ran a successful business. The economy hit. The business went bankrupt. He took his own life. She's mid-50s. She has never had a job. She has no house. She has no savings. Life insurance is in question. She comes to YWorks, and she writes that resume, takes it, goes to the University of Arizona where she wants to get a job, and gets a job, which leads to a scholarship. This year, she graduates with a degree in psychology to help survivors of suicide. That's success.
And we will put up on our website just how other women can participate in this program. And it starts every month?
Every single month.
Right. Kelly, thanks so much for being here today.
Maria.
Dwindling stocks of food, water, and other aid are stoking fear and chaos in the Philippines, adding to despair in the aftermath of the typhoon.
The first official numbers are out. Roughly 100,000 people have signed up for health insurance in the new state and federal marketplaces, well short of initial expectations.
And we close with another personal take on the setbacks and successes of healthcare reform. Tonight, a cancer patient shares her story.
The Affordable Health Care Act means that I have a chance.
Those are just some of the stories we're covering on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
The soaring production of oil in the United States offers a side benefit. It's easier to replace oil sales blocked from Iran.
The temptation to not fully participate in the sanctions of Iran would have been much greater had it not been for this fracking and energy revolution in the United States.
I'm Steve Inskeep, the new politics of energy on the next morning edition from NPR News.
Just a few decades ago, complementary and alternative medicine practices, such as acupuncture and equine therapy, were largely considered unconventional. Today, many of those therapies, known as CAM, are gaining acceptance from doctors and medical researchers. But there are issues such as regulation and insurance that still need to be addressed. Tonight, Georgia Davis continues this conversation with UA professor Cheryl Ritenbaugh, focusing on the role of politicians in alternative medicine.
So set the stage for me. What was the thinking about Western medicine versus these other kinds of healing systems in the 1950s, 1960s?
Well, I think that was an era of really believing that Western medicine was going to cure everything. It was in the 1960s that we had the war on cancer, and they were going to eliminate all cancer by 2000. And we put a man on the moon, and I think that the attitude in Western medicine was we could solve it all. And a lot of the sort of big kind of acute diseases we've done really well on, and so there have been a lot of advances. But I think as people are living longer and doctors are being able to deal with a lot of the more acute and serious illnesses, this pile of chronic pain, depression, some of those other things where Western medicine hasn't been so successful have been sort of growing. And in the early 1990s, Senator Tom Harkin from Iowa had some, I believe, dermatology condition that he couldn't get any relief for, that was healed using bee propolis, which is from the queen bee. And so he went to NIH to find out who was studying that. Well, nobody was studying that. That wasn't on anybody's radar. And he thought that the National Institutes of Health should be able to study the treatments that are out there. So he really moved forward to create originally an Office of Alternative Medicine within the NIH under the director, and that was created in 1991. And then they, did a lot of meetings and roundtables and things like that. And in the mid-1990s, the Institute of Medicine constituted a panel to look at alternative therapies. And one of the faculty members from here at the U, Dr. Mark Nichter, was on that panel of sort of evaluating what was going on. And by the end of the 1990s, the NIH, with Senator Harkin, I believe, still enthusiastic, the Congress actually approved creating the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, which was an independent freestanding center which had its own funding. For a period from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, there was a whole branch of the National Cancer Institute that also had its own funding at almost the same level as NCAM, to look at the use of alternative therapies for the side effects of cancer chemotherapies, and also to look at some of the magical cure kinds of things. So they were both looking at those amazing cure stories to see if there was anything there, but then also looking at this growing use of alternative therapies for cancer chemotherapy kinds of side effects. So the funding really began to ramp up in the late 1990s and early 2000s for research on alternative therapies, both for cancer and for everything else. And so it was once that funding got started that then people began to really be able to seriously do research in the field.
So how has CAM been received by the National Institutes of Health?
Well, the interesting thing is that because NCAM is within the NIH, the whole procedure for doing research, for getting projects funded, reviewed, it's just the same as it is within the rest of NIH. So you have, if you apply for funding, you write the same kind of research protocol, you have it reviewed by your peers, and early on, there was hardly anybody doing research in these areas. So people were coming to review the work from medicine or oncology or psychology or whatever the field might be that was relevant. And that's continued to be a way, actually, that scientists not doing alternative medicine research get intrigued, is they end up reviewing grants of people who are doing alternative medicine research. So there's a way at the whole review and funding process that the differences aren't quite as stark as they are once you try to then publish the results, or once people look at your results. They look much more starkly different. But in that review and scientific funding process, it's very intertwined right now.
We will have more of that interview in just a moment. Now we continue our conversation with UA Professor Cheryl Ritenbaugh to find out how Tucson has played a central role in mainstreaming many complementary and alternative therapies.
So, of course, one of the widespread criticisms of CAM is that it's pseudoscience or it's quackery, right? And that maybe it shouldn't receive the federal government's attention or its funding. So how do you respond to that?
Their criticisms might have had more justification around the turn of the millennium, but there is a growing body of research at this point, and we don't have, in CAM therapies, there aren't magic bullets that cure everything, But on the other hand, in Western medicine, we haven't been doing all that well at finding drugs that cure what we want without side effects. And the CAM therapies are being widely used by people, And they're very, very safe. And the one thing that has become quite clear with thousands and thousands of people now in these CAM trials is that the side effects are vanishingly small. And the side effects, the negative side effects, and a lot of the side effects of the body-based therapies are positive. So you get side effects in a pain treatment of improved sleep, improved mood, more energy, and these kinds of things, which you don't get with opioid, pain medication and other things. So I think that when the research is taken in totality, it's really being not adequately reviewed or sort of summarized by the people who are really out to try to get rid of it.
So what has Tucson's role been in all of this?
Well, Tucson has actually played a pretty large role throughout the history. Dr. Andrew Weil, of course, has been a leader of integrative medicine kind of through, since before NCAM was probably funded. He was part of the original conversations around the Office of Alternative Medicine. So there's been kind of a Tucson fragrance to what's happened, if you will. But there have been a number of studies. In the first full round of funding in the early 2000s, there were center grants given. And the University of Arizona had one of those center grants that was jointly run by Dr. Weil and the Department of Pediatrics with Dr. Fayez-Guichon. And they're one of the early studies of echinacea that showed that it didn't work for what they had hoped it would work for. But some other studies looking at some body-based therapies for cerebral palsy that did seem to help the kids. So, they had interesting studies in that. We were part of some of the earliest studies funded in the 90s around acupuncture for depression, and that research has been an important part of setting the stage for how you look at acupuncture when the points are being tailored. You don't just choose one acupuncture point, but you actually adjust them to the person. So that research has been really important in methods. And then throughout the last 10 or 15 years, we've had ongoing research on botanicals, and we now have Dr. Funk doing that work. We have people doing sort of nutraceutical research in the NCI, with the NCI, and Dr. Thompson and Dr. Hakim. And we've had a study that I did on acupuncture for temporomandibular dysfunction. We've had training grants to teach students how to do this that lasted for 10 years. And so the U of A has really, been kind of visible in this. And now in this newest era, we have Dr. Sternberg coming to look at biological markers of how people are responding to place, and Dr. Chuck Raison in psychiatry, who's looking at the role of compassion meditation in both depression, but also how does it change inflammation. So I think this most recent generation of research is really moving into how do these therapies change biomarkers? And I think that that's kind of the last missing link that will tie this firmly into the biology and make this really a part of NIH, such that even the Quackbuster group have to finally say, well, I guess there really is something there.
That's our show. To keep up with the latest news and watch the segments from this and other editions of AZ Illustrated, go to our website, azpm.org. I'm Maria Parham. Thanks for watching.